Off the storm-racked coast of the Pacific Northwest, where fog swallows every sound and even the sea seems to hold its breath, there stands an abandoned naval outpost, Fort Ravenshore. For 20 years, its lighthouse has remained dark. Until one night, a war-scarred veteran and his loyal dog saw a single flash pierce the mist. When they crossed that rusted gate, they didn't just find a signal. They uncovered a secret buried beneath the sea and a fight for survival that would test everything they had left. Because sometimes, in the deepest darkness, the only light left is loyalty. If you find this story meaningful, please subscribe to the channel and give us a heart to motivate us to make more touching videos. Let's continue the story together. The wind from the Atlantic howled through the ruins of Fort Ravenshore, carrying the smell of rust and salt. Waves crashed against the black cliffs of Blackwater Island, where only gulls and ghosts dared to linger. Inside an old shack that once belonged to a radio technician, Ethan Cole sat near a flickering lantern. The man was in his early 40s, tall but worn down, his shoulders bowed from invisible weight. His beard was peppered with grey. His eyes, steel blue yet distant, betrayed years of sleepless nights. Afghanistan had left its marks, a limp, a scar behind his jaw, and a silence that clung to him like a second skin. Across from him, lying on a wool blanket, was Scout, his 7-year-old German shepherd, large, wolfish, with a grey-white coat that shimmered faintly in the lamplight. Scout was more than a dog. He was Ethan's last link to purpose. Trained as a military rescue canine, he carried an instinct sharper than fear. Tonight, however, his calm was broken. His ears pricked, nose twitching toward the window, a low growl vibrating in his chest. Ethan looked up from his rusted cup of coffee. "What is it, boy?" The dog rose, pacing to the door, tail stiff, eyes locked on the storm outside. Then Ethan saw it, a faint, pulsing light beyond the dunes. Once, twice, then gone. For 20 years, the lighthouse of Fort Ravenshore had been dead. Yet now, something, or someone, had reignited its heart. He slipped on his coat, a battered navy parka lined with faded patches from his service days. The fabric smelled of seawater and oil. Scout waited by the door, muscles tense, ready. As they stepped into the downpour, the rain sliced through the darkness like shards of glass. The island felt alive, humming underfoot, every gust of wind whispering in Morse-like rhythm. Ethan's pulse quickened. He had walked this island hundreds of times, but never had the night felt so watchful. When the lighthouse blinked again, just once, he whispered, "That's no accident." Scout barked once, sharp and certain, as if agreeing. They climbed the winding path to the base of the tower. The structure loomed like a sleeping beast. Its steel ribs corroded, its lantern room shattered, stairs wrapped in ivy and seaweed. Ethan ran his hand along the cold railing and noticed something wrong. Fresh footprints, heavy and recent, pressed into the wet sand. Human. He followed them to a hatch at the tower's base. A rusted padlock hung broken beside it, the edges of the metal still bright. "This wasn't opened long ago," he muttered. The hair on Scout's back bristled as he sniffed near the hinge, then growled, a low, guttural warning. Ethan crouched, heart hammering against his ribs. The hatch had a strange pattern of scratches, parallel, deliberate. He touched it, and a faint click echoed beneath his palm, mechanical and sharp. Scout barked once, alarmed. Ethan froze. A chill ran up his spine as he realized what he had just done. "Damn it," he whispered, stepping back. Under the sand, a faint red light blinked on, a motion sensor still active after all these years. The dog whimpered softly, pressing against his leg. Above them, the light from the tower flared again, brighter this time. Then went dark, as if acknowledging his mistake. Somewhere, far beyond the fog, an answering signal blinked back. The moment Ethan's fingers brushed the hatch, the metallic echo died into an eerie stillness. Then came a soft, mechanical hum, deep beneath the concrete, like something ancient awakening. He looked down. The faint red glow from the sand was spreading, forming a ring around the base of the tower. Scout barked once, sharp and anxious. "Easy, boy," Ethan murmured, though his voice was tight. He turned the hatch wheel slowly, the corroded iron groaning, and pushed. The door gave way with a hiss, revealing a narrow stairway spiraling into darkness. The smell of rust, oil, and stagnant water rose up like a ghost from the sea. Ethan hesitated, but curiosity, that fatal flaw of soldiers who lived too long in silence, won. Halfway down, a voice cut through the storm. "Stop! Don't move another step!" Ethan spun, flashlight trembling in his hand. A woman stood at the entrance, drenched from the rain, pointing a flare gun toward him. She was tall and lean, her frame wiry but tense with practiced control. Her coat, navy canvas, patched at the elbows, clung to her from the downpour. "Harper Quinn," she introduced herself after a breath, lowering the flare slightly. Her auburn hair was plastered to her face, her brown eyes sharp with suspicion. "I'm a journalist," she said. "I thought this island was off limits." Her tone was steady, but there was a hint of curiosity, a spark that matched his own. Ethan frowned, noting the camera strapped across her chest and the old compass dangling from her neck. "You picked a hell of a night for sightseeing," he replied. The floor trembled beneath them, a deep rumble that felt alive. A gust of warm air burst up the stairwell, followed by a metallic clang from above. Harper's eyes widened. The door just sealed. Ethan rushed back, but the hatch had locked itself, the wheel frozen solid. The red lights along the walls shifted to orange, blinking in rhythmic pulses. Scout whined, pressing against Ethan's leg. "It's automated," Harper said, scanning the glowing panels with her flashlight. "These are maritime failsafes, part of a flood purge system." She found a rusted metal board bolted to the wall, covered in faded warning labels. Her fingers traced a chart beneath layers of grime. A set of color-coded timers marked purge cycle, 90 minutes. "Oh, God," she whispered. "It's designed to flush the tunnels with seawater." A hiss filled the air. Somewhere below, a pump groaned awake. Cold brine began to seep through the grated floor, swirling around their boots. Ethan's mind snapped into survival mode. "We move now." Harper nodded, gripping her camera like a weapon. Scout led them down the spiral, paws splashing through the rising water. The stairs ended in a low corridor, lined with pipes and old fuse boxes, each flickering with ghostly light. The deeper they went, the louder the water became, pressurized, relentless. "They meant to drown this place," Harper muttered. "Or bury something under it?" Ethan didn't answer. His flashlight beam found a side passage blocked by debris, but Scout was staring at the main door ahead, tail rigid. The dog growled, nose fixed on something glinting beneath the surface. A thin, metal disc no larger than a dinner plate, half submerged, marked with faded stenciling. Ethan's breath caught. "That's not debris," he said. "It's a mine." Harper's face drained of color. "Then this isn't an accident." The water was up to their knees now, cold and biting. The timer lights blinked faster, orange turning to crimson. 90 minutes, maybe less. Ethan steadied himself, pressing one hand on the doorframe as the current tugged at his legs. Scout barked once, sharp and urgent. He turned to Harper, their eyes locking in the red gloom. "Looks like someone doesn't want us getting out of here alive." And above them, from somewhere deep within the walls, a new sound began, a low mechanical heartbeat, counting down. The corridor stretched endlessly, the walls slick with condensation and the metallic stench of decay. The water had reached Ethan's knees, swirling with oil and fragments of debris. Every echo of their movement returned distorted, like whispers inside a drowning lung. Scout moved ahead, ears twitching, his fur glistening with brine. The dog's breathing was steady, but his eyes flicked between shadows, watching for something unseen. Ethan's flashlight sputtered, its beam cutting through the haze of rising vapor. He knew that smell. Chemical, acrid, like the base wash tanks from his days in the service. Harper stumbled behind him, coughing violently. "It burns," she rasped, clutching her throat. Ethan turned and caught her before she collapsed, his pulse hammering. Her face was pale, lips trembling, pupils dilated. "It's chlorine gas," he said, voice low and grim. "The storage tanks must have ruptured." He ripped off his jacket and tore a sleeve from his undershirt, soaking the fabric in stagnant water before pressing it gently over her nose and mouth. "Breathe through this." Harper tried to protest, but her voice broke into a fit of coughs. Ethan removed the single respirator hanging from his belt, a relic from his military days, and strapped it over her face instead. "You'll need it more than me." She shook her head weakly. "You'll pass out first." Ethan smiled faintly, though the corners of his mouth barely moved. "Lady, I've passed out in worse places." The attempt at humor faltered as his own throat began to tighten, each breath scraping like sandpaper. Scout barked sharply, the sound reverberating off the concrete, a warning that kept them moving. They reached a fork, one path blocked by a fallen pipe, the other narrowing to a low metal crawlway marked maintenance access. Harper hesitated, but Ethan gestured toward it. Smaller passage means less flooding. The crawlway reeked of rust and ammonia, but it was their only option. Ethan crouched, shining his light into the tight corridor. The ceiling sagged low, forcing them to move on hands and knees. Water sloshed beneath them, colder now, biting into bone. Then came the faint metallic hiss, an unseen leak nearby. Harper's breathing grew ragged again, the respirator fogging with condensation. Scout froze mid-step, ears pricked, and then, without a sound, he slipped into a narrow ventilation duct barely wide enough for his body. The silence stretched. Ethan's stomach clenched. Every second felt like an eternity. Then came the faint clatter of metal from somewhere beyond the duct. "Scout?" he whispered. No response. The sound came again, closer this time, a rhythmic jingle, followed by the dog's shadow emerging from the darkness. Clenched in Scout's jaws was a bundle of rusted keys, tangled on a ring stamped Naval OPS 1973. Ethan's heart lifted for the first time in hours. "Good boy," he breathed, taking the keys. "Damn good boy." He tested them on a corroded control panel near the next door. One clicked. A green light flickered weakly, then the lock disengaged with a low thud. As the door creaked open, a wave of cold, stagnant air poured through. They stumbled into a new chamber, wider, lined with collapsed lockers and peeling hazard signs. A faded schematic on the wall read, "Emergency pump override, level B3. Harper's voice was a hoarse whisper. "We're not far from the generator room." Ethan glanced at his watch. 45 minutes left. The air felt heavier now, the chlorine thinning but still deadly. Scout shook off water, panting, and pressed close to Ethan's side. The veteran exhaled slowly, resting a trembling hand on the dog's neck. "You just saved our skins again," he murmured, voice cracking with weary pride. "You're better than any damn engineer I ever had." The faint flicker of a green exit light reflected in his eyes, but beyond it, somewhere deeper in the tunnels, another sound stirred, like machinery waking from a long, haunted sleep. The heat hit them the moment they entered. The generator chamber was a metal cathedral. High ceilings choked in steam, pipes bleeding smoke, and the tang of burning oil hanging thick as tar. Red warning lights strobed against the dripping walls, casting Ethan and Harper in flashes of crimson. The floor trembled under their boots. Scout barked once, his body tense, hackles flaring. The dog's nose caught something human beyond the haze. Ethan raised his flashlight, its beam cutting through layers of smoke, and froze. A figure emerged, tall and broad-shouldered, the glint of a weapon in his hand. The man's face was weathered, his jaw lined with stubble, and his grey-green eyes carried the same sharpness Ethan remembered from another life. "Thomas Reddick," Ethan breathed. Thomas looked older, but not weaker. His hair, once dark, was streaked with white. A deep scar slashed across his temple. He still moved with the precision of a soldier, methodical, measured. But his uniform wasn't government issue anymore. The black tactical vest bore the insignia of Kincaid Maritime Security. "Didn't think I'd see you again, Cole," he said, voice low but steady. "You always had a bad habit of walking into places you shouldn't." Ethan's lips tightened. "You always had a bad habit of selling out the wrong people." Harper stood half-hidden behind Ethan, her camera lens reflecting the red light. Thomas's gaze flicked toward her, assessing. "The reporter," he muttered. "You're meddling in things that'll get you both buried." Ethan took a step forward. "What the hell is this place, Tom? What's Kincaid hiding under this island?" Thomas didn't answer. He simply gestured toward the console near the reactor core, a massive panel with flickering gauges and a single red lever locked under glass. "You see that? You're standing inside the ignition heart of Fort Ravenshore. This place isn't a decommissioned base, it's a waste burial unit. Kincaid's been dumping chemical residue from military contracts down here for years. The system purges the evidence with seawater every 90 minutes. You tripped the cycle when you came in." His tone was coldly factual, but there was a shadow in his eyes, regret perhaps, buried under obedience. Ethan's hands clenched. "So you're guarding a mass grave for poison?" Thomas raised his gun slightly, jaw tightening. "I'm guarding my job, and my family. You think the Navy pension covers my kid's surgery?" The words landed heavy. For a second, the two men stood in silence, the ghosts of camaraderie flickering between them. Harper's voice broke through the static. "If you're half the soldier he says you were, you won't let innocent people die to cover a corporation's sins." Thomas's jaw twitched. Then, with a sudden motion, he stepped forward and smashed the glass cover over the red lever. "You don't get it," he said. "It's already set. I can't stop it." He yanked the lever down. The generator roared alive. Fire burst along the ceiling conduits and the alarms changed pitch, steady beeps turning into a relentless siren. Scout barked furiously, circling Ethan, as lights flickered from red to blinding white. Harper shielded her eyes. "He's going to blow the whole place," she shouted. Thomas backed toward the side exit, gun still drawn. "I'll open a way out if you hand over your data drive," he barked. Ethan glared through the smoke. "You once said no man gets left behind," he said. "Guess that oath died somewhere along the way." Thomas hesitated, eyes burning. Then he disappeared into the haze, leaving behind the mechanical thrum of the secondary engines, and the realization that Fort Ravenshore was seconds away from tearing itself apart. The explosion hit like a thunderclap beneath the earth. A storm of smoke and debris roared through the generator hall, hurling Ethan and Harper to the ground. The world became a blur of firelight and steel. Scout yelped, skidding across the slick floor but scrambling back on his paws, barking furiously into the chaos. Through the haze, Ethan saw the cause. A pipe overloaded by pressure had ruptured, sending shrapnel slicing through the air. The ceiling groaned, metal screaming as one of the overhead beams buckled. Thomas stood too close. "Move!" Ethan shouted, but the warning came too late. The massive support beam gave way with a sound like breaking bones slamming down across Thomas's leg. His gun clattered away, skidding into a pool of oil. Harper sprinted forward without hesitation. The heat was unbearable, a living thing wrapping around them. "He's trapped!" she yelled. Thomas tried to push the beam off, but his strength was gone, pain contorting his face. Blood streamed down from a gash on his forehead, mixing with the soot. "Leave me," he growled through gritted teeth. "The sequence is locked. You've got 40 minutes before it blows." Ethan ignored him, stepping into the spreading flames. His boots hissed against molten metal. He crouched, shoulder braced under the beam, every muscle trembling. "I'm not leaving anyone behind," he said, voice rough, the old soldier rising in him again. Harper grabbed a crowbar from the tool rack and jammed it under the beam. Scout darted in, teeth clamping onto Ethan's webbing strap, pulling with all his strength. The combined force was enough. The beam shifted an inch, then another. With a final shout, Ethan lifted, and Thomas rolled free. They collapsed together, coughing in the smoke. Harper tore a strip of her sleeve, pressing it to Thomas's bleeding leg. "You're lucky your head's thicker than that steel," she said, half laughing, half shaking. Thomas looked up at Ethan, disbelief flickering behind the pain. "You still saving people who tried to kill you, Cole?" Ethan wiped sweat and soot from his brow. "Some habits don't die easy." Scout whined softly, licking the soot from Thomas's hand. For the first time, the man's hardened expression cracked. His voice came low, hoarse. "The detonations. They're tied to the tide. It's a chain reaction. Once it starts, it uses sea pressure to feed the next blast." Harper's eyes widened. "How long?" Thomas hesitated, then reached into his vest pocket, pulling out a small metallic device, the size of a pager, battered and marked with serial numbers. "I've got the abort code, but there's a catch." He held it up between trembling fingers. "The system needs an external confirmation, the grey light beacon. It's the only transmitter strong enough to verify the shutdown." Ethan stared at him, realization dawning. "You're saying we have to turn the lighthouse back on?" Thomas nodded weakly. "It's the key. Once it sends the code, everything stops." "But—" He trailed off, glancing toward the roof where fire danced across the ducts. "Activating it broadcasts our location to every satellite still tied to Kincaid's network. They'll know exactly where we are." Harper met Ethan's gaze, eyes steady despite the fear. "Then let them come," she said. "We're done running." Thomas stared at her for a long moment, then gave a short, broken laugh. "You've got guts, lady." He slid the device across the floor toward Ethan. "Make it count." Ethan pocketed it, helping the wounded man stand. The alarms had changed tone again, slower, deeper, the sound of an ending drawing near. Scout nudged his leg, tail low, eyes sharp with understanding. "All right, partner," Ethan murmured. "Time to light this island up." And as they limped out of the burning chamber, the shadows behind them writhed like ghosts, whispering the countdown of a dying fortress. The control room felt like a furnace. Flames crawled across the ceiling while black water surged at their waists, every surge threatening to drown the last pocket of air. The smell of burning oil and wet metal was suffocating. Ethan's chest heaved as he punched in the override code on the corroded console. His fingers trembled, slick with blood and seawater. The screen flickered, spitting sparks before showing a faint green light. "Come on, stay with me," he muttered through clenched teeth. Beside him, Harper steadied the transmitter box, her face smeared with grime. Her auburn hair clung to her temples, and her voice came out hoarse but steady. "You've got one chance, Ethan. That's all we'll get." Her eyes, sharp and exhausted, searched his face. She could see the tremor of guilt and resolve beneath his calm. Scout stood in front of them, half submerged, ears pinned back, tail rigid, ready for whatever came next. A deep hum rose beneath the floor as the system booted. The tower above them groaned, ancient circuits awakening after decades of silence. Ethan looked at the cracked monitor. Grey light power core, reinitializing, 62%. He could almost feel the lighthouse heartbeat syncing with his own. Then, from beyond the shattered observation window, a flash of muzzle fire cut through the rain. The sound came milliseconds later, the crack of a rifle echoing inside the chamber. The bullet sliced past his face, tearing skin along his cheekbone. Ethan fell back, blood mixing with seawater. Harper screamed his name, but before she could move, Scout exploded into motion. The dog leaped over the rail, straight toward the source of the shot. A second gunfire echoed, and Scout yelped, a short, choked sound. "Scout!" Ethan's voice broke, raw and furious. He scrambled forward, catching the limp grey-white body before it sank. A crimson thread drifted across the surface, beautiful and terrible under the flashing lights. The dog's breathing was shallow, his eyes flickering open. "Stay with me, buddy," Ethan whispered, his voice cracking like glass. "We're almost home." Harper was at the main lever, tears streaking through soot. "We have to finish it," she shouted over the alarm. "If we don't, none of this matters." Ethan looked from her to Scout, his oldest companion, and for one awful second, his mind split between love and duty. Then he set the dog down gently on the platform, his hand trembling as he brushed the fur along its neck. "You did your job, soldier," he said softly, and turned back to the console. Outside, the storm raged. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the wreck of Fort Ravenshore like a dying beast. Ethan slammed the override key home, and Harper yanked the activation lever with both hands. The ground convulsed. Every fuse and circuit screamed alive. Then, light. The grey light beacon erupted in a column of gold, slicing through the black heavens, brighter than the storm itself. The whole island shuddered as the SOS sequence engaged, broadcasting to every maritime satellite in range. "It's working!" Harper cried, but her voice was drowned by a new explosion, one of the lower reactors giving way. Thomas stumbled into the doorway, blood running down his arm, clutching a sidearm in one hand. His face was pale but determined. "Go!" he barked. "They're here!" He turned back down the corridor, firing into the shadows as armed silhouettes surged through the smoke. The bridge to the tower was breaking apart, metal twisting under heat and pressure. Ethan hoisted Scout into his arms, heavy, limp, but still breathing, and ran. Flames chased him up the staircase, each step trembling beneath his boots. Behind him, Harper followed, coughing through smoke. Thomas's gunfire echoed once more, then silence, the sound swallowed by another explosion. They burst through the upper hatch into the rain. The storm's wind hit like knives, but the sight before them stopped time. The grey light beacon burning through the storm, sweeping the sea with its golden arc. In the distance, faint lights appeared. Search beams, sirens, the Coast Guard, salvation. Ethan clutched Scout tighter as they stumbled across the bridge, and the golden light swept over them like the hand of a merciful God. Dawn crept over the Atlantic like a slow promise, painting the horizon in streaks of gold and ash. What remained of Fort Ravenshore smouldered beneath the light, a skeleton of twisted metal, torn cables, and the faint pulse of the lighthouse beacon cutting through the mist. The storm had passed, leaving behind only the hiss of cooling steel and the smell of salt and fire. Rescue helicopters hovered above, their blades churning up spray. On the cracked causeway, Ethan Cole lay half-conscious, his body bruised and covered in soot, one arm still locked protectively around Scout, who whimpered faintly but breathed. A Coast Guard officer knelt beside him, a tall man with kind, weathered features and the calm precision of someone used to disaster. His name tag read Captain Mason Reed. He was in his early 50s, with short grey hair and eyes the colour of tarnished bronze, eyes that had seen too many rescues come too late. "We've got survivors," he said into his radio, his tone steady but low. "Get the stretchers down here now." Nearby, Harper Quinn sat on the remnants of a steel beam, her hair tangled, face streaked with soot and tears. She cradled her camera against her chest, as if it were a lifeline. When she looked up and saw Ethan, her breath caught. "He's alive," she whispered, stumbling toward him. Mason gave a brief nod as his team moved with practiced efficiency, wrapping Ethan and Scout in emergency blankets. "He's a damn lucky man," Mason said quietly. "That tower should have come down hours ago." Harper smiled weakly. "It didn't fall because they wouldn't let it." A few feet away, another rescue worker knelt beside Thomas Reddick, who was barely conscious, his uniform torn and blackened. His once commanding voice was a rasp. Did it work?" he murmured. Ethan turned his head slightly, eyes finding Thomas's through the smoke. "It worked," he said, voice barely audible. "The light's back." Thomas gave a faint, broken smile before closing his eyes as the medics carried him away. By noon, the island swarmed with investigators, cameras, and rescue personnel. The wreckage of Kincaid Maritime's operations was laid bare. Shipping manifests, coded drives, and recordings recovered from the bunker. Harper stood at the shoreline, microphone in hand, her voice steady now. "The people of Blackwater Island once believed Fort Ravenshore was dead," she said to the lens. "But last night, one light refused to die. And in its glow, truth was finally seen. The report aired nationwide under the title The Light That Wouldn't Die, sparking an investigation that brought Kincaid Maritime's executives to trial. Ethan watched the broadcast from a hospital bed a week later, one hand resting on Scout's bandaged side. When Harper visited, she found him quiet, eyes fixed on the screen. "You did it," she said softly. He shook his head. "No, we all did, even the ones who thought they couldn't be saved." A year later, the wind over Blackwater Island carried the scent of cedar and sea spray instead of smoke. The ruins had been rebuilt into the Ravenshore Marine and Veteran Rehabilitation Centre. The lighthouse, once a wound, now stood restored, its tower gleaming white against the grey sky. Ethan, dressed in a simple field jacket, walked along the cliffs with Scout trotting at his side. The dog's fur had grown back around the scar on his flank, though a faint mark remained like a medal of its own. Children's laughter echoed from the courtyard, where veterans worked alongside volunteers planting seagrass. Harper, now in charge of the centre's outreach, waved from the pier, her camera slung across her shoulder. The grey light beacon came alive again, casting its long, warm arc across the ocean. Ethan paused at the railing, Scout sitting beside him, ears perked toward the sound of the sea. He placed a hand on the dog's neck and whispered, "You brought the light back, old friend." The wind carried the words out toward the horizon, and the lighthouse answered with another sweep of gold, soft, endless, and alive. When the storms of life close in, and the world feels as dark as Fort Ravenshore once was, remember, light is never truly gone. Sometimes, God lets the night fall so that we may learn how to see through faith. The same power that reignited the grey light beacon can live in every heart that chooses hope over fear, compassion over silence. Miracles don't always arrive as thunder. They often come as loyalty, courage, or a helping hand when all seems lost. If this story touched you, share it to spread the light, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to join us for more true-hearted tales. May God bless you and your loved ones with peace, strength, and the courage to find your own light in the darkness.